Thank you, Fihn. Still muted, dude.
So there he is. So
Thank you
you're
for coming back.
yeah, excited to do part two, part one.
Part one, this is such a bummer because our interview a couple of weeks ago was freaking great interview. I loved it. I got off it really excited, thinking this is a really good one. And then I just totally screwed up and managed to corrupt the file, uploaded it, the wrong file, corrupted the right file, and can't recover. And
Yeah.
it took me about a week to pull myself together to say, I got to tell Frankie what I did wrong.
It's funny. I feel like 50% of working online is just figuring out why the tech isn't working like the tech is supposed to.
I
So I don't
suppose
know. I
so.
feel like this is the most normal thing in the world. I've definitely done whole coaching calls and then forgot to hit record at the start. And it's confusing now too because the AI bots listening will say, I'm recording. And so you think you're recording it. And you're like, no, we're
I
just taking.
I set my Zoom to auto record all calls, but I have one friend in particular who, sometimes he's a little bit in the shady zone. Every time I get on the call, I'll be like, "Why the fuck are you recording this call? Are you at the fence or something?"
Yeah. Wearing a wire too, just so you know.
He was talking about the old Sopranos episodes where they hug each other and pat each other down as they're hugging. Anyway, thank you for coming back again, Frankie, to
Hey,
redo this conversation for a do-over. And I've not absolutely no idea what to talk about this time. But I've been watching a bunch of your trainings in between now and last time and just loving them, like the simplicity.
yeah.
So
Yeah, it's funny though. It's one of those things that takes you 20 years to realize how to make it simple. Because I definitely didn't feel like, going through this entrepreneurial journey that it was simple and easy. I love when people are like, oh, it's so easy to get started. I'm like, that may be your experience, but my experience was it was deathly hard. And I was thinking about, I was just telling somebody else earlier, but it took me more than a year and a half just to make one single dollar on the internet. Like people make it sound like just click a couple of buttons, do this, blah blah blah. It's like for me, I still remember I got we were selling a real estate course. It was a friend of mine's, and I was helping him to like rank it and get visibility. And I remember all of a sudden I got a PayPal notification that somebody had sent $47, and I remember just like most excited I'd ever been in my life. Like, man, you're never gonna believe this. I'm like, holy shit, holy shit! Like, we just got $47, and he was like, who, and that was the best part. We didn't know. We didn't know who the person was, and we tried googling them, and they had a generic name, like a Dan Smith or you know, a Joe Johnson. And so
yes,
when you Google them, there's only like 12 billion of them. So we never found out like who our first customer was. It was just this anonymous moment we had where like PayPal money had come in, and we like, had made magic internet monies, and it was real.
that first time feels so good. It really
Yeah.
does. It's like magic. You feel like you're Harry Potter.
Yeah.
You made
Yeah.
money
Really.
fall out of the sky.
Especially too, like for me, it was a year and a half. So like I'm on like day 500 of zero after zero after zero after zero after zero. And, mostly my fault for like dabbling in this and dabbling in that, never really following anything through. But nonetheless, like something came through and it was like, oh crap, it's real. Yeah.
You talked on some of your trainings a lot about like working in the legal field. Is that something you still do now?
I still have legal clients. I'm not intentionally growing it. And part of the reason is like I'm working on a second book. And the big idea is really, really simple, is that it's an idea that I first heard in Robert Kiyosaki, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Many of you guys read it, is that like rich people work for assets. And you work to own things, not to sell things. And it's a very counterintuitive thing, is that like you use your marketing skill to buy things undervalued, and then and it made a lot of sense to me, but at the time, the issue was like I wasn't flipping apartment buildings. I wasn't, buying and selling businesses. I wasn't. So I thought like none of that stuff really directly applied to me, even though it was like really, really cool. And one day, obviously, like, my mentor, Travis Sago, it was a big epiphany on that. But realizing that digital things could be assets that could be just like apartment buildings rented out. And so for me, what I've really kind of shifted as like and it became really obvious, like, because over the last, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years, I got like a real estate acquisition business as well. That's kind of just, it's a little small time thing, but it's managed through virtual assistants. There's very little I have to do to do it. And it becomes really obvious when you do real estate, like you make money when you buy things. Like you realize the money when you sell it, but if you like pay too much for a house, like you'll never be able to resell it later and make a profit. And the flip side of that is if you buy it cheap enough, like you almost can't lose on the other side of it, because like, you know, somebody will pay you something for it. And when I realized this applied digitally, it just didn't make sense for me to like keep chasing clients when I could, like, for example, you know, and I go into more detail obviously when I release it, but like, you know, I had a friend who built a course, and he got 60,000 people to buy this course. He actually got 250,000 people, but 60,000 of them joined a community, and they just got real busy and couldn't keep up with the community. And so I view that community as just like an apartment building that could be potentially rented and, you know, added value to. And you do that like ethically in a way where you make everybody better off and do it in like a win-win kind of way. But I'm like, you know, I make more making an offer to get a community. In his case, sometimes you don't even have to use actual money to do it. It's just like, hey, you obviously can't keep up on this. Can I turn it into something cool? And I'll just flip you a percentage of sales every time we, you know, move something through the community. And you start with a 60,000 person buying asset where there's an existing relationship. And so like a lot of my focus has been like kind of moving away from client work and more just about acquisition of like what I would call digital assets. But having said that, I still got like lots of old farty lawyers that I work with that are all, you know, super cool, and, you know, we still talk. So yes, yes and no.
Okay. No, I like the metaphor. I think Kevin Hutto, who's no longer with us, used to talk about digital oil wells. This kind of idea
Yeah.
about like online income producing assets. And I know there's a guy from the UK named Dom Wells who built a whole investment fund around this, about like essentially he started off selling Amazon affiliate sites, and then he started aggregating them, and then he started buying other kinds of cash flowing websites, and then he aggregated them all into a fund. And I think he's now listed it, like you can buy shares in his fund
Yeah.
publicly. And
The other flip side of doing it that way, which you know, I do love like certain client work, but client work, you're ultimately there's a like part of the trade includes your time and energy into it. And when you begin to sell like assets, the tool is the value. And so like, you know, one of my favorite examples is I had a guy who came in my mastermind, and he was selling websites for cleaning company, and he used to own his own cleaning company beforehand. And one of the issues cleaning company has, and this is like kind of like, you know, a lot of businesses have this, but they get a lot of what they perceive as tire kickers, because somebody calls up and says, you know, how much is it for blank? And they have, you know, zero sales and closing skills. So a lot of those people go, thanks, I'll call you back. And they just literally never hear from that person ever again. And so he built a quote widget on this client's website. And they had this, you know, old, ugly, like looked like 1999 GeoCities website. And he, you know, obviously gave him something new and modern. But the real benefit of it was there's this chat widget where you can just say, hey, I got a 3-bedroom house. I'm looking for, you know, somebody to clean it. That'll probably be about 3 hours and cost you $125, that kind of thing.
yes,
And the cleaning companies loved it. And so they're like, this is great. And then, you know, he was asking the question, which I think is a middle class question, is how can I get more web design clients? And that's making you the value and your expertise in making websites and things like that. And there's a time for money trade kind of embedded into that. And in doing so, like you almost think like a middle class person. You're thinking like, how do I get hired? How do I get somebody to like hire me to make them a website?
how do I get a better
And what
job?
yeah, exactly. It's a job in another format. You'll have, you know, some autonomy in that job, but still nonetheless. And I said, well, this website you made is a digital asset that actually has value to other people. In fact, you could plug and play that for another cleaning company today in a different area, and it'd probably have a pretty similar effect, that it would eliminate their tire kickers and get more like serious buyer intent driven. Plus, it's just a cool looking website. Instead of trying to sell you as a designer and getting hired more, why don't you sell this exact website 1,000 times more? And because you already made it and now there's no more work, like you have to customize it for each person a little bit, which to me is like the McDonald's equivalent. Like, I'll put extra cheese on your burger, but we're not making something totally new. But you'll personalize it a little bit. Now you can make like really strong offers where like, I'm so confident this thing will eliminate at least some of the tire kickers in your machine that I'll literally install this website on your server for free, and I'll give you 60 days just to try it. And if at the end of those 60 days you say, hey, you're right, this does actually help with like more buyer intent driven leads, I'll just rent it to you. And you can buy it from me for 199 bucks a month or 299 a month for as long as you keep it, no contract, blah, blah, blah. And now he's selling the asset again and again and again and again as many times. And how many different cleaning companies could benefit from the same site? And you're no longer thinking like a middle-class person of how do I get hired? You're now thinking like a wealthy person of how do I rent the stuff I already have? And so that's, kind of answering your earlier question, why I haven't got too caught up in client work, because it's like I can rent assets in flow and I don't actually have to, do all this delivering and that kind of stuff.
I love this because this is at a place where I've come to in the recent times like that. I
Yeah.
like clients. I like doing interesting work, but it certainly gets annoying trying to figure out different shit every day.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not even annoying, draining. It's draining.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like, as a copywriter, you get incomplete information. They're like, we're launching a new course. This is a title, write some copy for it. Like, you don't even know what's in it. So like, it's like, what do I say? I know one sentence about it, right? Like ChatGPT, can you tell?
Yeah, I did that recently. Somebody gave me a course. They're like, can you get any testimonials for this? And like, lucky in this case that the client actually has a shit ton of social proof and like celebrity clients and stuff like that make it possible. But they're like, no, we've never sold this before. We actually made this course 3 years ago and we just come around to selling it now. We've got 0 testimonials.
Yeah.
But like, okay. But then it means I've got to go watch it and like pull some shit out of the course itself.
Yeah.
And it's good. I mean, enjoy it. That's the copywriter's trade. But there does come a point when you're like, okay, then the job's done and you move on. And yeah, like you said, it's job thinking. It's like you can't, you're never going. There's a very hard cap on where you can go with that.
Yeah.
Only certain number of hours in the day.
Ultimately, like there's a hidden metric in there and it's energy, and it requires a lot of energy to actually fulfill on it. As we're like, let me copy and paste a website to you, like that's 10 minutes worth of energy, and you can train a VA to do that. So it doesn't even have to be your 10 minutes doing it, right? So it's like I think ultimately energy actually restricts people's cash flow and earning potential more than they realize, because
Yeah.
you see this copywriting agency, really any service where just like, okay, you sell it, but now you spend all your hours fulfilling on it. And you're like, you're obviously not making more sales, as where the person who sells the website complete as is, and they're renting out their asset, they almost have no upside or no, like almost no fulfillment on it, because the fulfillment was the first time they created it. It was like,
How do you go about identifying things that could be cash flowing digital assets?
So I got a whole chapter and kind of laying those out. Almost always like it's understanding that when people build businesses, assets are the side effect. And it almost always like people create things for self-use that they don't realize would be for other people. So like the assets are like anytime you do some kind of marketing work for somebody, you created assets. You may not recognize those, but like you may have had to come up with ads, you may have had to come up with landing pages, you may have had to come up with copy and swipe files and things like that. And I think, I go into detail in the book, but I think the biggest hidden asset that nobody even realizes to me is the most valuable asset is what I call distribution. In other words, like people who have audiences and relationships with them. And I use an example kind of in the book to kind of illustrate this, but I showed two farmers side by side, and one farmer is really focused on selling his thing 1-to-1. So he comes up with great offers, 2-for-1 eggs, buy one now, get one free, finest, highest quality. Their packages have 12, ours have 18, now with 50% more eggs than our competitors. And he does all those kind of things.
Yeah,
And the second farmer focuses on distribution. So he just goes to stores and makes an offer for them to go sell his stuff for him. Now, fast forward that like 6-12 months, like who do you think is going to be selling more eggs? The guy who's at the side of the road selling a onesie, twosie, or the guy who's in 150 stores nationwide? Right? It becomes really, really obvious when you kind of like look at it in that context. But I say this because one of the side effects of our modern world of the last like 10, 15 years, which was not always true, is that anybody can be a content creator. And it used to be like, TV really controlled everything. And so like you wanted to make a show, you had to go to an executive, you had to get them to buy in, there had to be a pilot, there had to be somebody like paying the bill. But like now to build an audience, like all you need is a phone, you hit record, you go, hey, I'm John. I'm going to tell you today the 3 tips about blah, blah, blah. Like you can start doing that and having an audience. Thank you. And so because of that, there's tons of people who built distribution and don't know it's worth anything. I hear all the time, they're like, well, what would I even sell people? What would I offer? What would I do? And it's like, you know, I have a friend, for example, really smart guy. He has like a video editing agency, and he drives around here out of Mexico on motorcycles. He's just like a really cool dude. And he decided to start documenting his Mexican motorcycle adventures a couple years ago. And so he built this motorcycle channel where you can watch him like race, you know, through the mountains and stuff. Well, he's got like 500,000 people that are subscribed to that channel. And I asked him one day, like, how are you guys doing? And with that, and he's like, oh, it's cool, but I don't really make any money from it. I was like not even a little bit. He said, zero. Like, you're telling me you got 500,000 distribution of people who like, know, and trust you, and you haven't monetized it. And you know, the classic thing people with distribution think is like, what would I even sell, or what else would I sell? And to me, it's like, well, if it's a motorcycle channel, I can think of 15 things just off the top of my head. Like,
Yeah.
they need helmets, they need bikes, there's probably
Sunglasses.
motorcycle events, there's glasses, there's like decals, there's some guy who wants flames on the side of his motorcycle, there's a fuel additive that'll make it go faster, right? Like, there's motorcycle ebooks, how to become, you know, the motorcycle Mac Daddy, right? Like, there's motorcycle private clubs and memberships and retreats, and I'm like, just tell one of those people that you got 500,000 people and you want to start selling their stuff, and they'll probably be open to paying you for that.
Yeah, it's interesting that so many people out there. I'm still surprised to hear that there are people who have a lot of distribution and don't realize they're seeing a lot of value, because you it's kind of assumed that knowledge is widely distributed. Maybe this is the curse of knowledge inside of marketing, is that
Yeah,
you know a lot of
because
shit that other
it's
people don't
obvious
know.
to us what we would do with that. We think it's just as obvious to them.
This is true. I wanted to talk to you also about like living far away from where you came from, because you moved down to Mexico, right? During
Yeah.
COVID time. Now that you've done it a couple of years, like, and you're raising kids like far from home, how does it feel? And what do you think are like the positives and the downsides?
I love it. So there's way more positives here for where I'm at for me than negatives. There are a few
Mhm.
negatives, and they're not what people think. Because the first two questions people like ask me, number one is it safe? Like, they just assume because they watch an episode of Narcos that it's like there's just drug cartel shootouts on the street every day, and like I'm just like, you know, driving under bullets. And the funniest thing, as because we're both foreigners, is it's always Americans who ask me that, and they like, is it safe? And I'm like, have you guys been to America? Like, when I walk through downtown whatever city, there's like fentanyl zombies crazy trying to like climb on me. I'm like, it's your country I don't feel safe in, not here, right? And here there is that kind of stuff, but my experience has been like, you kind of got to go out of your way and find it. Like, you got to kind of be like looking for trouble, at least where I'm at. You know, saying this to somebody else, I'm not saying I have it all figured out in life. I most definitely don't. But you know, if you could told me 20 years ago that my problems of today would be my problems of today, like, you know, I couldn't complain. Like, we have been pretty amazing setup. I'm like, so, you know, the ocean's right out my window. I got a 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom castle. It's like noticeably bigger than other houses around us. And then mostly for me, the most like the biggest blessing of it is the amount of help we have. So I have like a, you know, guy who cleans my pool. Like, I get to enjoy a pool, but not have to like worry about, you know, cleaning the pump, and, you know, just somebody comes and does that. And we got, you know, a maid who comes and cleans up our place, and we have a gardener who comes and, you know, maintains my garden. I got a guy who looks after my chickens and make sure I got 11 chickens. We got, like, you know, a guy who comes and cleans my car once a month because it gets full of sand when you live on the beach. Like, that's just a normal thing. It's like you track lots of sand. I got a guy who like, you know, does odd things like, hey, if I want firewood to have a fire tonight, he'll go like through the bush, collect a bunch of firewood. And you know, there's just stuff like that. And so I'm like, you know, I'm not saying I have it all made in life. I definitely don't, but you know, like, I'm pretty happy with how things are here and how things turned out for us.
And were you able, have your kids, do they go to school in Spanish or do they do it in English?
We're mostly homeschooling them, at least for right now. So
Oh, cool.
I'm with my kids like a lot, a lot, a lot.
And have you actually had to go and learn how to be like a educator in the like sense of like going through curriculum, or did you just decide I'm just going to teach them like about
It's funny
life
because
very broadly?
I'm probably like, and I'm not saying other people have to have my opinion, but my opinion of like school was that it's mostly just like memorize a bunch of useless shit and spit it out on a test. And I never felt like that was real learning. And and I believe the precursor to all real learning is curiosity. Is like, and what's kind of sealed it for me is we were thinking about like potentially doing some homeschooling and trying it out. Now, I have a friend Kate who's built up like a $4 million a year coaching business, and she has exactly 3 kids. I have 3 kids, and she's homeschooled them, but she's like they're now like end of high school age, like around there. My kids are super young, like and I said like, the two biggest things people ask you is like basically, are your kids going to be dumb and are they going to be socialized? Like that's the big fear. They're gonna be stupid and they won't know how to talk to other kids. And so I asked her firstly about the are they dumb, and her answer kind of blew my mind because she told me um, she only really does an hour and a half of formal teaching of like, and it's just basically English and math, like basic math, like those two things. And she says they have to, because they're in America, they have every 3 years they have to go for the standardized testing, and they can actually pass the standardized testing 3 and 6 years in advance. So they're like grade levels ahead of their, and they only do that in an hour and a half a week. And I asked like, how did they learn? And they said, well, they just come to me and they're curious. Like my kid came to me this morning, said, I'm really interested in the pyramids. And so I gave her some resources to go learn about the pyramids. And then they learn, they self-teach themselves because they're curious and they actually want to learn. And then the second thing is, like, are they socialized? I'm like, do they have any friends? And yeah, they say, they just meet their friends and things they're passionate about. So like one kid has a karate class, the other kid has a dance class, and they go meet friends that are also into dance. And like they're perfectly normal, socialized. And so when I heard that, I was like, man, I really feel like you can do more in an hour and a half of like focused work than you can in what most school does in 40 hours a week. So for us, it just made sense. I'm not saying it'll make sense for everybody. I'm not like trying to preach on anybody listening to this, but just, that was our decision to kind of go that way.
Yeah, look, I'm kind of getting to the where I'm with you on this. When the kids were small, I mean, we have pretty damn good primary level education in Ireland, at least for the fundamentals like reading, writing, arithmetic. But like they're getting to the age of 8 and 10 now, where I'm just like, the kids starting to get a little bit older, especially my daughter moving towards teenage years. And I just noticed as they get into that age where culture starts to become more important to them, like the external culture, it's like the abiding popular culture of whatever the mainstream of society is, low expectations. I fucking hate that.
Yeah.
And I don't want my kids
People are set up to
indoctrinated
be
with that
victims.
shit.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm like getting close to the point where I'm like, I want to pull them out.
Yeah.
And it's here in Ireland, it's not so easy to do that. But to have to be in Ireland forever.
I don't think it's that easy to do anywhere, but certainly there's probably more rules and regulations against doing that than there are here. That's part of the reason why we came somewhere where, the state's not going to send child protection services and yank your kid away, kind of thing. They just don't do that here.
They're too busy with the cartels.
Exactly. They got real problems here.
What kind of snacks you got there, Frankie?
It was the first meal of the day, actually. The wife brought me a green juice. That's my favorite. I got some cut up strawberries, and she made these like little homemade like peanut butter chocolate balls. So that's breakfast.
You are living the good life.
Yeah.
So I asked you a bunch of stuff last time, and I completely forgot all the things I asked you. I just remember
we
being really
talked about
engrossed in the conversation. Do you remember any of the things we talked about?
Yeah, I remember we talked about phoneless sales because it was like the idea that you don't have to chase people one-to-one and have these long 60, 90-minute convince you kind of calls in order to, propel your business forward kind of thing.
Yes. Let's talk about that some more, because this is something you evangelize, and I've been watching a bunch of your stuff on YouTube since then. But if anyone watching, go watch Frankie's YouTube channel. He's giving away shit there for free that I've myself have paid many thousands for in the past from other providers.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, since John mentioned it, the actual like process for closing people on the phone or without the phone call, like in video, is like it's laid out there. Like I didn't hold anything back, so you guys can like, it's called my Loom training. That's what everybody wants to know me for. But it started with I mentioned with a phenomenon which is if you do enough calls in a row, you'll start to realize that people's needs are not as unique. And you'll literally you sound like a mind reader after you do it. So for me, it started, I would get on a phone call with lawyers, and they would respond to an ad about like, hey, we can get you some clients using our, 1, 2, 3 ABC new mechanism doohickey. And I don't remember what it was at the time, but I want to say probably Facebook ads. But when I would get on the call with them, they'd say, okay, I just need more new clients. And I'd say, okay, like, tell me a little bit more about that. And they'd say, well, I have roller coaster income. And I go, what do you mean by that? And they say, well, all my business comes from referrals. And those referrals, they send me a lot of business some months, and other months like barely anything, right? So like, I don't know whether it's going to be an amazing month or a good month. And so like 1 month I'm up 70 grand, next month I'm down to 2. I don't know whether I should be hiring staff or like conserving money to try and keep the lights on. It's all over the place. I feel like I have a business that I have no control over. Then you get on a second call, and the next lawyer says, I just need more new clients. And I'd say, what do you mean by that? They say, well, I got roller coaster income. Well, I say, I got a bunch of referrals, and they come from these different partners, and then, it's up 1 month, down the next, and I feel like I have no control over it. Then you get on a third call, and the guy says, I just need more new clients. And you say, why is that? You say, I got roller coaster income. And you go, oh yeah? And eventually you hear that enough times in a row where somebody goes to you get on the phone with John, and he says, hey, I need more new clients. And I'd say, hey, John, just a question for you. Do you need more new clients because you got roller coaster income where you're really high 1 month and down the next, and it's because you're dependent on between 3 and 6 referral partners, and those referral partners send you a lot some months, but other months not. And so you don't know whether you should be scaling, you don't know whether you should be laying off people, trying to conserve money and keep the lights on, and it's just left you with a business you feel like you have no control over. Well, now John's like, mind exploded, you just read my mind. But it's really not as mind reading as it sounds, right? Like you just listened and heard the same thing over and over as like a recurring kind of thing.
It's cold reading. It's
Yeah.
cold reading, but you do cold
Yeah.
reading through experience.
Yeah.
You've basically run the hustle a bunch of times, and now you've got it down pat and smooth.
Yeah. And you know what people are going to say before they say it. Exactly. If you give people 3 seconds to think about something, they're probably only going to come up with like 3, 4 ideas. So anyway, I started to, or very early on, is to realize sales calls had these patterns. There were some other ones, and I never really liked scripts. But what I found is there were certain milestones you would reach in a call, and you just know it. And I started to realize that most of the questions people were asking were way more basic than like the information I was giving them. Like, how long does this thing take? Like, they weren't asking like, how many backlinks are you going to build me? And all of the things that I thought were important. They're just like, how long? Well, what's it going to look like when it's done? And so I started to realize the big 5 milestones that you're going to go through in like pretty much every sales call is the first thing they're going to ask you is like, what is this thing? And they don't necessarily ask it exactly as that question. It gets asked 1,000 different ways, but essentially they're asking the same question. Like, tell me a little bit about you guys and what you do. Tell me, what it is you guys do for plumbers. Can you tell me a little bit about your copywriting? I got this problem. Is that anything you guys can do something? And they're essentially just, all the different ways asking, what is this thing about? And then what happens is if you make it through that milestone and you actually show somebody either, yes, I can solve this specific problem, or I can create the specific outcome that you're after for you, and it's one of the things they actually want, immediately their mind wonders, I wonder if that would work in my situation, right? Like, that sounds really cool. Okay. Oh, you've helped 7 other plumbers to blow up their thing. I wonder if that would work for me. And then so eventually, if you answer that and they say, okay, that'll work in my situation, it begins to a more like logical part of the sale where they go, I wonder how that works. How does it work? And so this is the thing, by the way, that's missing from most people, is actually laying out the logical, how does it work? They're too busy trying to make it sound amazing, over the top, hypey kind of promise, that they forget to just lay out like, here's how it actually does the thing it's supposed to do the thing for you. And if you get through those 3 milestones, then their next question is, and you'd be amazed at how many sales calls, I'd say like 70% of sales calls at least are just them wondering, so how much is it? And then the very last question is, if that piece makes sense, the last milestone is they actually need to be told and instructed, like, how do I get started? Like, we think it's obvious that they know they can just go here, click the link and buy it, but it's actually not always that crystal clear for them. And so what I realized when I started doing this on video, and in the beginning I experimented with it. Ironically, I'm known as the 5-minute Loom guy, but there's a reason is because when I wasn't sure I would be able to do it in video. And so it's like, hey, I don't want to pay for the full version of Loom. And Loom's like nothing. It's like $10, but I just feel like over the years I've ended up like, you sign up for a software, you forget about it. 2.5 years later, you're like, shit, I'm still giving these guys $10 a month. Like, how do I go cancel that? So I didn't want one of those scenarios to happen. So it's like, let's just test it with the 5-minute free version. And it was ruthless. The first couple recordings I made, you're like 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Those last 12 seconds get cut off, and then your whole video doesn't make sense because now the call to action got cut off. So I had to figure out how to condense this like 60, 90-minute sales call into a 5-minute thing. It was a real challenge. Like I couldn't do it first few takes. And eventually I figured out how to do it. And a big breakthrough in it was when I realized that first step of like, what is this thing, is don't answer that with words, answer that with a picture. And so like, for example, I just helped a guy actually yesterday morning. He's selling like an AI chatbot, and he's trying to sell like how cool and amazing it is. And I go, when it's finished, what actually happens? And they go, well, they get actually somebody like booked into their calendar. Like they'll get a chat, it'll reach out and it'll schedule them their thing. So I'm like, just show them, like, I'm gonna get people scheduled in your calendar like this. Show them a picture of that. These are sales opportunities that our AI bot created for you. Here's 7 of them, right? Show them a picture of that. And so when I finally cracked that, all of a sudden I could make the thing work in 5 minutes. And so I was like, oh, actually, they don't need to be these super long videos. And all I was doing was just answering these videos. Like, what is this thing? Oh, here's what this thing is. Will it work for me? It works for you if you're in the scenario. How does it work? Here's 3 to 5 steps, how it's going to bring you from where you are to where you want to be. How much is it? Cost this much. And for that, you're going to get, this type of benefit. How do I get started? If that sounds like you, click this button below, fill out this form. Go here, and there's going to be a little 10-minute onboarding thing, and we'll get you started. And once I started doing that, lo and behold, I discovered kind of like a phenomenon. It's a very interesting thing that I have now, is the mysterious inbox payment phenomenon, where you're like, just payments come in and you have to investigate who just paid you for what. Because, like video doesn't sleep. Like I have people who buy my stuff at 3 a.m. Like I woke up, there were sales from my videos, and I have to go, who just bought what from me? Let's click on those and make sure they got the thing they paid for. And like, there's no tech issues or whatever. But that's basically it. And it just came from like, thousands of sales calls. Like I thought it was this big complicated thing. And I'm like, for me, I've sold SEO and different paid ads. And I tried to like really make it sound cool and awesome and blah, blah, blah. And then when I realized like, they have real basic questions. Like, what is this thing? Is it going to work for me? How's it work? How long is it going to take? How much is this thing going to cost? And when you started just like preemptively answering the things you knew they were going to ask in the order that you knew they were going to ask them, it's just basically a sales call and fast forward. And what happens is it allows you. And for me, the other thing is it's eliminated all these challenges out of my machine. I have other new challenges related to it. But one of the challenges of the machine that I used to have, anytime you try and scale an offer, you bring in salespeople. Even when I found like, there's hiring and people issues. And even when I found like the best salespeople, which occasionally I'd like find that unicorn, they're still human. They still have like days off. Like I remember one time my superstar sales guy's like, man, my girlfriend just broke up with me. I just need a week off. And you're like, well, I can't afford for my like superstar. The only guy who knows how to like close all these things, like take a week off, dude. Like I was not planning on you. And like, and those kind of things. And I never have any of those issues with video. I also like people tell me all these issues with scheduling and following up. Like how many notifications do I send to make people actually show up to a call? I don't have to think about any of that because they just watch the video and buy it or don't, right?
Yes. Oh, the more I see this, the more I love it, and the more I've actually been stealing some of your stuff and putting it into my client work the last couple of weeks.
Amen.
Like just in terms of like the framework, your framework for creating this video is like, this is actually just a good VSL framework, full stop. Like,
yeah,
because people have these 13, 14, 21 point, 60 point VSL frameworks, and like they just get so overcomplicated. It's like, just, the less is
the other
better.
thing is all my stuff is engineered for like busy, successful people who have money. Cause I'm 20 years been in B2B selling to business owners, not to end consumers. Like I used to watch the VSLs for end consumers. Like I used to follow a guy, I'm sure you know him, John Benson. And his VSLs, like they worked, but they were like written for consumers. And so like there'd be a pattern interrupt. He'd be like, this is a fish. And in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to show you why a fish. And then there's this long, like 12-minute backstory about how he came to the thing. And like all of that stuff worked for end consumers, but like dealing with business people, like I don't have time to watch your 45-minute thing. Just tell me how much is the thing and what I'm going to get. And like, I'll make a decision right now whether or not I'm going to get it. And so what happens is when I started eliminating all those pieces, it doesn't work on everybody. If you try and do business to consumer and you probably just are like really short and concise, I don't know that most people could make a decision that quickly. But business people, like, I've had many experiences where like, I remember, you realize what you think is a big deal in your world is nothing. Like one of those moments for me, I was in, um, like a lawyer mastermind. And I remember at the time I was charging $2,000 a month for my Facebook ad service. And I was thinking about raising the price to 2,500, but I thought I'm going to get pushback on that 2,500. One of the guys there was one of the top lawyers in the world. He's the biggest lawyer in Texas. He's sitting there. We having just like a little private conversation. He got a phone call, said, hey, Frankie, can I just take this call real quick? I'll be like 2 minutes and I'd love to continue this. And he takes the call for 2 minutes and I can hear half the call, only half the call. And he's like, well, how much is it? $100,000. That's nothing. Can you just put that on the black Amex Visa so we get the reward points? Here I am stressing, like thinking $500 extra is going to bankrupt somebody like this. He doesn't even like, and it's not that I wouldn't expect that guy to spend $100,000. Like obviously he's, he spends $1 million a month on TV. What surprised me is that $100,000 didn't even trigger it. Like that's a lot of money reflex that would have been, very present in my kind of thing. And you start to realize, like, just fucking tell him it's $2,500 and let him buy it. And he probably prefers to buy it that way than to be sold to through a call because he lacks time. He's busy. Like he has stuff coming at him. Like the $2,500, the $500 plus or minus won't change his life. But what will change is if I got to spend an hour and a half talking to you just to spend $2,500, now I lose an hour and a half of my time that I could be hiring or building a team or making TV commercials or whatever it is for them. And so I've realized that it just works especially well on people who have money, who are busy and successful and just want the details like summarized in a super simple, elegant way without fluff and hype and all that. Like, I don't really care about your 12-minute backstory of how you came to like be an SEO guy. Just like, tell me how much it is to hire you right now. Right. Like,
so much of what I've like learned in the past year has in fact been unlearning of all like, internet marketing and biz op stuff that makes total sense for like getting you to, it makes total sense, like you said, for a consumer or for somebody to like looking for an opportunity. But when you're
yeah,
actually starting to go back out there and turn this stuff on for people who don't live inside the world of biz op and internet marketing, you've got to just throw a lot of it out the window. Like the principles are good, but the tactics are just, they skis the hell out of most people. They're just like, what the fuck is that?
totally. I don't know. There's a guy in America who's like the epitome of that. His name is Tom Vu. And I
Yeah,
want to say
he's
he was
brilliant. I love him.
70s or 80s. For those of you guys who didn't see him, he's
80s.
a Vietnamese guy, and he had a come to my real estate. You're gonna get rich in real estate kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the whole video is just like selling the dream. There's very little like substance in it. So like there's this tiny little Vietnamese guy and he's on a boat with like 12 bikini babes. And he's sitting on a yacht, like, come to my seminar and you can be rich in real estate. I get checked from real estate and I live on yacht with babes. You could be like me, kind of thing. Like that was his pitch, right?
I love Tom Vu. He's
Yeah.
fucking amazing. All his videos are on YouTube, by the way. If you're watching this,
Yeah.
I'll stick him in the video description. Tom Vu is
There's a Family Guy cutscene where they kind of do an old Tom Fu restaurant, and he's sitting in a mansion, and he's like, "Why you at work? Well, I pee in your toilet, and I don't flush, and I use your toilet, and I leave a stinky poo in mine, or something like that along those lines."
why am I not surprised that you like Family Guy?
Yeah.
The first in those 5 questions about the what is it? Can we just dig into that one a little bit more? Because the rest of them are self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But that one, what is it? Is it actually what is it? Or is it what is it going to do? Or is there something deeper they're trying to drive at with the what is it?
You're accurate to say what is it going to do for me? Because like really nobody cares that a hammer is a hammer. Like everybody has a different reason for it. Like somebody wants to build a deck and have backyard barbecues, and another person wants to remodel a kitchen and have their friends over, and another person wants to build a birdhouse and have a smiling daughter. So you're selling the smiling daughter and birdhouse, not the hammer that provides that sort of outcome. So I do it like the what is it? Like I found there's only 3 ways to answer that question in a picture. is number one is you can show them an outcome you can create. And a lot of times this is way simpler than most people realize. Like I had a guy, he was running Facebook ads and doing it for kitchen remodelers. And he's like, I don't know how to show them like a really cool outcome. And it's like, well, you run Facebook ads. And he's like, yeah. It's like people fill out a form, yeah. And then what happens? Like, well, we submit the form and we send it to the guy. And I was like, okay, pull up one of those forms. And we look at it and somebody filled up a form and said, like, I'm interested in getting my kitchen remodeled. And they sent a couple of pictures. I'm like, there you go. That's what you show them. That's the outcome you actually create for them. Show them that. And he's like, well, that doesn't seem interesting and sexy enough, right? Like, is like that's not like I just nailed it. But I'm like, okay, probably to 99% of the world, what you said is true. But to a kitchen remodeling guy who knows that may be a $40,000 job, like you just showed me a treasure map. Like I want that. So that's an example of an outcome. It's like you just, if you're doing stuff for people, you're creating outcomes. Like for example, like in a picture, one of the things I've tried to show people is like, I get payments without talking to people. And like, how do I receive payments? Well, I actually get them in my inbox and I get notifications that said, you got paid for this and you got paid for that. So I showed, here's a screenshot of my inbox. These are all like payments that came in without talking to anybody, right? So like that's how I receive it, right? So I show people what the outcome looks like. And in some level, you're doing an outcome. You're probably like most people, like you probably don't think it's a big deal. You probably like devalue and go, who would care? It's just a little Facebook form fill. It's nothing exciting. So that's one of the things you can show people. Now, the flip side of that is you can show people a symptom. And if you do this accurately, as you know, as a copywriter, they'll go, holy shit, that's me. And a lot of times, again, you don't guess. And I say symptom because people don't understand their deeper level problem. Like a lot of people's deeper level problem is they don't have enough of a back end, so their front end economics don't work. But I can't tell you is your average customer value too low because you don't understand that's your real problem. All I can say is like Facebook ads costs going through the roof, right? Like you can only meet them where they're at. So you have to like talk about very symptomatic level. Does it hurt here? And my favorite example that I remember, there's a guy in our mastermind. He was dealing with dentists. And he had spoken to a few dentists, and their problem was really simple. They summarized it in 4 words. They said the chair is empty. And I said, what do you mean by that? And we went a little deeper and he said, well, I paid for a $40,000 website so I could like keep my hygienist busy and like get patients sitting in the chair, because when the chair is full, the hygienist makes me $100 an hour. When the chair is empty, I'm paying her $40 an hour plus benefits. So she's either making me money or costing me money. And whenever the chair is empty, that means I'm losing money. And so we made a picture of the symptom, and we put a $40,000 website, like a really fancy looking dental website, put an arrow and showed a picture of a hygienist chair empty, like a dental chair with nobody in it. Said, does this sound familiar? You spent 40 grand on a website, but at the end of the day, the hygienist chair is empty. And if you're a dentist watching, you're like, holy shit, that's exactly what this is. And it doesn't matter whether you got a Facebook ad, a Google ad, an SEO package, or whatever you sell, copywriting service, funnel, referral camp, whatever you have attached to that, he's going to believe that you actually know how to help him just because you so accurately described, that's me. And then the third thing you can show in that picture is the before and after. And this is how weight loss has been sold for 1 billion years. Like, here's fat me, here's 6-pack me at the beach me, before, after. And so it's really just the last 2 shown side by side. So sometimes I'll do this when I show people like phoneless sales. I'll show like, hey, I used to have a calendar full of people. And so I'll show a calendar with all these bookings on it. And then I'll put an arrow. And then I got some guy who says, I'm in, let's do it. And then payment received. It's like, that's it. This is what sales used to be, a calendar full of people talking. That's before, that's the symptom. And then an arrow going to after of like, now it's inbox, I'm in, let's do it. And so that's really it. It's just like you're just showing them a symptom, you're showing them an outcome you create, or you're putting them 2 side by side to contrast the 2 of them side by side. And it's like, it sounds so simple, but you would be amazed because so much of the advice that's taught in our space isn't that. And so like, I remember for me, the common advice, like when running Facebook ads, and like I used to run tens of thousands of Facebook ads, maybe not quite that many, but in the thousands of split tests. And I just split tested a lot of shit. Why? Because some other guy told me you should split test. And so we split tested every image you can think of, like stupid shit. I had like a cat holding a briefcase pretending to be a lawyer, like, haha, maybe I'll make them laugh because it's social media. And we tested like pictures of lawyers, like, obvious things of like, lawyers in suits and gavels and, law books and things that look very lawyery. And then tried like random shit like, hey, I wonder what happened if we do a pattern interrupt and we like take the same image and we make a gold bar around the outside. We just tried all this random shit. And we only did it because that's what everybody says you have to, right? Like you got to get these super clever and you got to impress them on social media. And what I found is that inevitably the stuff that worked the best was just like when we showed a picture of like, this is what's going to look like for you when it's done, or this is the problem it's going to solve for you, or I should say the symptom that you're experiencing that it'll help with. And what they were never like the best social ads in terms of likes, comments, and things like that, but they just made fucking sales. And I was like, at the end of the day, like, what do you want? Do you want cat pictures on the internet and people laughing and liking and comment, or do you want people to actually buy your shit? And I was like, well, I just want people to buy my shit. And so now it's made like images and all those social media so much easier because I just show a picture of like, this is what it looks like. This is what inbox money looks like. This is what a video sale looks like. This is what a full calendar used to look like. This is what, all kinds of different, this is what it looks like when the chair is empty. Or, like another example of a symptom one is I've done this a lot in the trades and construction. A big problem is crews of guys standing around going, what do you want me to do, boss? Same thing as a hygienist chair. They're being paid to do nothing. So like I just show a picture. This is a crew of guys standing around. Here's an arrow. Instead, you could be sent into a job like this, right? And it sounds almost too simple, but like I feel like part of it is like you said, it's the unlearning of you've been told like you got like for me, I got to split test 3,000 images, and at the end of the day, the one that was just like show them the thing they're going to get, that's the one that won the split test of 2,999 options. And so like now I just go straight to that. I'm just like very direct. Here's what it is. Do you want it? Kind of thing.
There's a lot of people making a bunch of money off making shit more complicated than it needs to be. That's one part of it.
Yeah.
And then
that's
the other part of it is that making shit simpler is a lot harder than making shit more complicated. Because like all of the things you've just told me, like those 5 questions, which are a very nice, tidy VSL framework. They're very similar to other VSL frameworks I've used, but they're, like I said, there's the 13-point framework and the 27-point and the 60-point.
Yeah.
And it's the same stuff, but with just more little fine detail in between that a lot of the time might not be needed. It's just like that's their proprietary system, They have to have something proprietary.
Yeah, exactly. Can't sell it if it's just 5 questions anybody can answer.
And then the other 3, like the 3 forms of picturing is like the outcome, the symptom, the before or after. Like again, all of those things are things that are taught, but they're taught in these very complex ways. So I think that the real key here is not just the simplicity, it's also the density. Like packing a lot of shit into like 5 lines.
Yeah. Well, like I don't know if you were ever like that, John, but growing up, not because I was interested in sales and marketing, but I used to like watch wacky like late night infomercials.
Mm-hmm.
Not because like I was trying to buy stuff or I was trying to learn sales and marketing. Like I just found them interesting because they were like, wait, if you act right now, we'll change it from 4 easy payments to 3 easy payments. Like, holy cow. Oh my God, John, what an offer. Like operators are standing by, call now. Hey, I'm taking orders right now, right? Like, and I always found them super ridiculous. But one of the things I learned is that every infomercial that I saw like more than one time, meaning it worked, they all had some kind of demonstration. So like, you didn't just say like, hey, the vacuum cleaner works. You dump a bucket of dirt on the ground with like cigarettes and tar, and then you run the vacuum over and you go, see, now try, John, bring out your old shitty vacuum, see if it'll do that. Nope, John's old shitty vacuum doesn't do that, right? Or there was a guy, a newer one, I don't know if you ever saw the Slappy Chop, the nut guy. You're gonna love my nuts. And he like shows how easy it is. They don't tell you in words it's easy to chop. They demonstrate this is what the thing does. And I realized that this applied to us too, but why it's tricky is so much of our stuff is intangible. And like I sometimes think it's really easy. So I'm just grabbing off my desk, but I got a guitar tuner in front of me. Some ways this is an easy sale because you can touch it, you can hold it, you can turn it on, you can see what it does, you can feel it, you can hold it. Most of our stuff that's expertise driven does not have such advantages. And so the demonstrations like still work just as well in infomercials as they did 20 years ago. They're just a lot harder in our industry to show it as a picture. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about like, how do you actually create demonstrations? And for the most part, they're pictures. Like, for example, just like 2 more, just wrapping off the on my head. I got a guy who does SEO for golf, like kind of country clubs. And he's saying like, how do I show them the thing they want? And I said like, okay, you finish the SEO, what happens? they just get more inquiries. Okay, well, what does an inquiry look like? Okay, well, somebody fills out their form and says, I'm interested in joining your country club. Can you show me an example? Yeah, here's one. All right, that's what you show them. That's what you're going to bring them. That's the outcome you're going to create for them. Hey, I'm interested in joining John's ABC Estates and Country Club as a member. Like that's what you do for them right there. Show them that picture, and like they'll get it like 1,000 times faster than trying to tell them about your SEO and your backlinks and your technical on page and your H1 tags and all the hammery things that just don't fucking matter to them.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I found your website on Google.
Yeah,
Bang, it's done.
I have another guy who's like he's doing this generating leads for personal injury lawyers, and he's trying to stand out. And he says, well, I just, I kind of get him phone calls. I'm like, do you have recordings and stuff? Like, yeah. And he like, we pulled up a recording. I was like, okay, there's your opening slide. Go, I'm going to bring you people like this, then hit play and go, yeah, hey, found your law firm and I hurt my back in an accident. I want to know if I have a case. There you go. Hit play. That's what I'm going to bring you. Right. It's very like much more like in there. And what it forces you to do is to think about how your stuff shows up in their experience, because most times you're attached to the long drawn out process it takes to get there, like all the steps along the copywriting, all the steps along the SEO, all the steps along making the website, but not the finish. Once that's done, people are just going to say, hey, I'm interested in your cleaning company. I want to get your 3-room package that you guys advertise on your website.
You just did it to me there, Frankie, because you actually answered the next question I was going to ask, which was how do we deal with the fact that we're selling super abstract shit that it's hard to demonstrate? And you preempted that question.
It's funny because I think we actually intuitively understand this as kids. So like growing up in Canada, my like side hustle, whenever you wanted to like make money, I had 2 ways of doing it. It was basically the same idea, just depended on the season. Summer, knock on the door, can I mow your lawn? And winter, want me to shovel your driveway and get all the snow out of there? And that's basically it, right? Like that's how you make money, and like you do it. And what happens is you intuitively know as a kid that people are buying what gets done, not the doing process. So it's like do you want your lawn mowed? Do you want like the finished lawn mowed? Do you want me to shovel your driveway for you? And what happens is somewhere along the line, I think we get so involved in the process that you become attached to those pieces. And so you want to talk about those things. Like I got the shovel 9000, it's got super handle. I got thermo gloves. I got the boots that keep my toes toasty warm. I've got the, and like, they just literally don't give any fucks about that. And so when you sell abstract stuff, it's the difference between selling the doing, which is what, like, if I look at 20 people in our world, they're selling the doing. I'm going to do SEO. I'm going to do copywriting. And you focus on what gets done. When it's all said and done and finished, what does the finished lawn look like? What does the finished driveway look like? And like I said, as kids, like you don't really complicate this. You don't get into, it's going to take me 20 minutes. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back and forth. I'm going to make a crosshatch diamond pattern for you. We're going to sprinkle some fertilizer. Oh, that's great. Can you just do it? Right? Can you just get it done? Right. But there's definitely an art, and I'll tell you, it has taken me practice, but the longer I do this, like most times I can tell people what their outcome is just based on like, and usually they just don't think it's a big deal. They're just like, yeah, somebody fills out a form. Well, if that's an $8,000 job, filling out a form that says, I'm ready to give you $8,000, that's a pretty exciting form fill out to the average person in your market, right? Like that's, you just said basically like, I'm going to hand you a treasure map 3 times a day.
I love it. And that actually give me some ideas for stuff I can show what I'm doing more effectively. One conversation I've had and one experience I've had recently is that when you solve a problem for a person, their mind goes to the next problem. And if they can't solve the next problem, it's going to be your problem. Have you experienced that, and how do you handle this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been an ongoing thing for all of us who have like these kind of tech expertise kind of jobs, whether we're writing copy or, doing it as an agency or coach or whatever, is probably been given free computer help for like 25 years now. like not just in terms of, scaling businesses, but like, I think I got a virus. Can you install Windows? And, all that stuff, right? Like I lost my password. What do I I even had people like, I remember my dad who has the same name as me, and barely understood how to turn his computer on. He got an email virus and it sent it from his one email to his other. And he clicked it again a second time because he thought it was coming from me because we have the same name.
Oh,
And then he
fuck.
called me on the phone to tell me like, hey, I think that thing you sent me was a virus. Like that thing you sent to yourself. Stuff like that. So I mean, I don't know if I've ever really had great boundaries on the free tech support, but
Yeah.
I like to think that if you have a tightly defined vertical, you can solve problems in such a way that your stuff is reusable. Just like the web design guy who's using the quoter for cleaning companies where they like it'll quote jobs and stuff like that. Like immediately they're probably going to say, well, we got this new problem, whatever it is, like fulfillment or hiring or whatever. You can be useful to people by just like, thinking a couple steps ahead. But like, I don't know. I mean, I've never really been great at the boundaries with that. But one thing that has helped me over the years is wherever I don't want to do shit, I make sure to refer them to somebody else because I know that, I just used to see this a lot in the professional kind of services. If I send you one person, you feel like you owe me one back.
Hmm.
And so it's actually better for both of us if I send out some shit I don't want to do, and then inevitably you send out some stuff that's more in our wheelhouse. But I don't know. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I'm still giving free tech support 25 years later, and I don't know if I'll ever get off that hamster wheel.
You talked about a tightly defined vertical. Can you define a tightly defined vertical and maybe give me some advice on how
Yeah,
to
it's,
create
it's a
one?
real simple thing to know if you have it. Okay, here's the litmus test. Because too many times people think like, should I do this for plumbers, butchers, candlestick makers, e-commerce, coaches? It's really simple. It's just the second time you do it for somebody, can you reuse 90% of the stuff you did for the last person? If the answer to that question is yes, you got a tightly defined vertical. If the answer to that question is no, keep going. Because like I think about companies that scaled, and I use really good. My two favorite examples are McDonald's and Amazon. People assume that what like company like McDonald's or Amazon is today is what they always were, but actually, when McDonald's first scaled, all they did was burgers. That's it. Like you couldn't eat, even in the beginning, they didn't even have fries and Coke. It was like literally just burgers. And they eventually added fries and Coke. And now, obviously, like, whatever the monstrosity, like the McRib or whatever they got going on, the chemical GMO modified, like,
Yeah, the Mac abomination.
whatever that is of the day, that's not how they scaled. They just had burgers. And the magic is when you're only doing burgers, somebody comes into your business and they say, um, um, can I get extra cheese on it? Yeah, you can put extra cheese on it, but you were 90% finished that burger even before they ordered it. Now you just adding an extra slice of cheese and going here. Somebody else says, like, I don't really like onions. Can you hold the onions? Sure, no problem. Like, grab a knife, scrape them off. Somebody else says, can I get an extra squirt of ketchup? Sure. Right. But for the most part, you're like 90% finished the burger even before they ordered it. The flip side of that, what most people do when they're trying to scale a business is like a restaurant that says yes to everything. So imagine you go into a restaurant and they say, hey, do you guys do Chinese food? And you don't really do Chinese food, but you say yes to that request. And then now you got to figure out all these like logistical challenges. Like I got to go to the Asian market and buy egg rolls, wrappers, and I got to buy a wok, and I got to figure out like where to get the fancy soy sauce. And then the next day somebody says, hey, do you guys make like Italian style pizza? And you say, sure, we make Neapolitan pizza. Now you got to secure a pizza oven. And then you got to like, figure out where to get the fancy mozzarella, and you got to get 00 flour. And then the next day somebody says, do you do catering? And then you have to like, okay, now I got to figure out how to deliver it and store it and find foods that like, go well for catering and get transferred. And every day you're solving a new problem. And what happens is the hidden metric and all that is energy. Is like it takes you a massive amount of energy every time you do it. The flip side of that is like kind of where we started our conversation. When you think about assets being the value and being like 90% finished, where you have a tightly defined vertical, it's you're just selling burgers. You're like, yeah, okay, you can have extra cheese, yeah, you can hold the pickles, whatever, but like you're getting a burger. Like if you came to me for something other than a burger, like you're at the wrong restaurant. Like we don't make Chinese food. You should go to John's Wok and Dim Sum. That they make great Chinese food, and John's going to send us his burger people just the same. And so what happens is the first time you do anything, it's a lot of work. Like no matter how you do it, like the first time you make that Chinese food, it's a lot of work. But if you're 90% finished the second time, where you go, oh, now we already got the egg roll wrappers, we already got the wok, we already got the soy sauce. Now it'll just take us 2 minutes to whip up some egg rolls because we already have everything. And so that's how I think about it is, and it really, excuse me, an elegant simplicity came to me because a mentor said to me something that like, it beat me over the head for 10 years because he said to me, we were hanging out and he lives in Myrtle Beach and like the guy makes upwards of 10 million a year plus. And I never saw him work. Like we hung out for 4 months. I like never saw him work. He was like, okay, we're now gonna go, fishing. Okay, now we're gonna go to the country club and shoot some. And every now and then he would like write down an idea and he would fax it back home to the office. And that was like his work for the day. And I was kind of just like, Ken, like I never see you work. Like how are you able to make the living you make? And you're like, I don't know, I never really see you. And he's like, no, I work like 5 hours a week. He's like, well, buddy, basically I like doing things that I could do once and get paid for again and again. And it was like, how do I do things once and get paid for it again and again? When he said it, it was like pretty profound and it hit me like a ton of bricks because I had a lot of income, but I realized it was all do once, get paid once. That if I took my foot off the gas and anything I was doing, it would all like eventually go to zero. There was no do once, get paid twice. There was only do once, get paid once. And so it was like, it actually led to like almost like a crisis in my mind. I was like, dude, if you stop the do once, like none of this shit will pay you again. It'll all eventually fall to the ground and all the balls you're juggling will fall to the ground. And so it was like, how do I do once and get paid again and again? And immediately, like I didn't have an answer. Like it wasn't like it came to me like in a minute, but over the course of like a year, I just started finding more opportunities and I became obsessed with the idea if I'm going to do something once, I'm going to get paid for it twice. And so when you have a tightly defined vertical, you have eyes in mind for the fact that whatever works for one plumber is going to work for another plumber. Whatever copy works for one coaching program is probably going to work for another, like very similar coaching program, and finding, places where you can use your stuff more than once. And so I think it's a proactive thing is like you think about, like, if I'm going to do this once, I better be getting paid 100 times for this thing I'm doing once. Like it's you design it with that in mind, which I didn't always do. Because for me in the beginning, it was just like I was the restaurant where somebody come in and said, do you do catering? Of course we do catering. And come right into Frankie's Catering Superstore and, you make it up as you go. But now it's just like, no, we do burgers. Do you do anything else but burgers? Yeah, we send you to John's to go get his Chinese food and then come back when you want a burger. But done in a nice way where you're going, hey, I want to be most helpful to you. John just makes better Chinese food than I could ever make you. And we make better burgers than he does. And so the best thing I can do is send you over to him.
Love it. One last question, if I may. How does one, okay, I get with now the value of a tightly defined vertical. How does one assess either the vertical you're in or the vertical you may want to be in? I mean, do you have a set of like heuristics or a kind of checklist that says, yeah, this could be good, or no, this will be a pain in the balls?
Yeah. I kind of believe that, like, I'll take somebody like you. I believe your copywriting skill, like you could be successful in almost any industry you wanted to go into. That doesn't mean it would be easy. Like there would still be like a learning curve and figuring things out. But like ultimately, you know how to sell stuff. And therefore, like there's always going to be a need for what you do somewhere. And so when it comes to verticals, what I've just learned is like, they're not all created equal. And my simple formula is this, is your past leaves clues, is you've done stuff before this. And inadvertently, some of that stuff you like doing, some of that stuff you love doing, and a lot of it you like probably didn't like doing, and some of it you even flat out hated. And usually the thing that defines it is not the what so much as the who you were doing it with. I've learned that like if you just do cool shit with cool people, like you'll have more fun doing it than if you do it like, for example, like I think of my worst client ever. The person's name was Tamara, and she had a husband. I don't remember the husband's name, but I felt like a lot of people have had this same kind of experience, but they were like low paying, super high maintenance. And I remember it almost felt like whenever they would write an email, it was written in all caps, standing on the chair, shouting at me about like, it's been 3 fucking minutes, Fihn. Why aren't you fucking done with this goddamn thing? Like you could just feel that vibe of communication. I ultimately like fired him and let him go. So when I think about picking a vertical, like clearly, let's not do more of that. I know it sounds like really obvious, but you'd be amazed at how many times the next person who shows up like that, they go, okay. And The flip side of that is I've had like, I think of one of the lawyer clients I've had for a long time. It's a guy named Mo, and the dude is hilarious. Like he's one of the, like, literally, he puts out like cartoon faces and he makes stupid wrestling jokes. Like most lawyers are very uptight and serious looking in suits, and they're like, call John now and we'll fight hard and get you every penny you deserve. Call now or the rest of lawyers, you know, and this kind of stuff. And here's a guy doing cartoon faces and making wrestling videos, which is like what I grew up on. He's like, well, you know something, brother? If you've been injured in an accident, you need to call Bo Mania right now. And I'm like, no way. Like, this guy's just hilarious. And so when I think it comes to picking a vertical, it's literally just look at who and what has given you the most fun and joy and focus on that. And what I found is what happens is a lot of times people are afraid you'll lose money in that journey. And I find almost always what happens is the opposite, is your stuff works better and it's more fun to do it. So you like engage with it. So the flip side for me is the first 7 years I sold plastic surgery, not because I woke up and had this undying love of plastic surgery. It's because a dude showed up and said, can we pay you for a plastic surgeon? I said, yeah. And then it worked really well. And then another plastic surgeon came, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. And like before I knew it, I got 120 surgeons all paying me to do this kind of thing, but I hated every single moment. And so what it created for me was a business that felt like every day, like pushing a boulder uphill. I could do it, but man, it was like every step was like a massive effort, because I'm like, I got to write some articles. I don't really want to write SEO articles about plastic surgery again today, but like, that's your job, dude, if you want to rank websites. So like every day felt like being a boulder. And when I focused on like, who are the people I just like doing stuff this for, and like be specific, not in an abstract way of like, I want to do this for dentists. Like, hey, if they were all like Greg, like, why was Greg so cool? And usually I find it's almost always three things. It's one of those is the intangible part, which is their attitude, right? They're just like cool people. One of those is their situation where you're like, I could actually help them, where it's like, like they came to me with something like I actually knew something about. And I don't know how I would kind of quantify this third piece, but it's kind of just like your mojo fit well together. Like if I know how to generate leads and you know how to close them, that's a good fit together. And so what happens is I just go back, and then what happens is, at least in my experience, those are the people you should pick as your vertical. Just do it on purpose. Like in the beginning, I just chose plastic surgeons because that's just what fell in my lap. As we're now, it's like I can pick and choose, like if I, like, for example, I do a lot of work with agency owners because I think they're really cool. Like, well, it's not a surprise. I put my stuff in agency owner podcasts, and I go on agency owners. I got an agency owner book. Like that's what comes through that. The other side of that is like based on, a vertical I've chosen and purposely put myself in front of. And so I know that's been kind of the journey for me. And even if you've never had a client before, because I know there's some people who are just trying to get started, there's almost always like past experiences that can be beneficial. So like, for example, I had a guy in my mastermind. He spent 15 years working in HVAC, selling HVAC. And then he's like, I should pick an industry. And I'm like, oh, I should go after like dentists, doctors, e-commerce, blah, blah, blah. I should pick some vertical. And it's like, but have you ever thought about doing HVAC? Because you like already speak their language. You already know half the people in it. You, like you understand their terminology. You actually know how to help them. You've sold for them. You already have connections in there, on and on and on. Oh, I never thought of that. So like, even if it was like his only life experience was as an employee, he still had something that he brought to the table. And sometimes even if it just tells you no, stay away from that industry, that still gives you closer clarity to what you should be doing. So to me, it's just saying, I call it the hell yes lifestyle, but it's just saying yes to the people and stuff you like doing stuff with. It sounds so overly simple, but I think most people come at it from like a money scarcity of thinking you have to accept what comes your way instead of proactively choose the stuff that's fun. And then what ends up happening is it stops feeling like a boulder uphill. Like for me, because all my stuff is now done with cool people, like my phone blows up every day, every single day. Like just since we've been talking, like just out of curiosity, let's see. Nothing crazy, but there's 3 new text messages. There's, I don't know, 4 more Facebook messages. There's a billion comments, emails and things like that. Just in the hour we've been talking, right? Like there's, hey, can you send me some thoughts on my video, since we've been talking about video close? Like all that stuff came in. But because it's done with people I like there's no part of me that feels like, oh God, I got to respond to emails, and like feels like the boulder's pushing uphill. The opposite. I'm like, dude, what are you working on? This is cool, right? And so I think it makes such a huge difference because I kind of use the story, but like not enough people when you optimize for the process by doing it with people you like, the outcomes are automatic, and everybody obsesses about outcomes and not the underlying process. And I think that's backwards. So like, I don't know, to me, like imagine you had somebody who says like, my goal is to have a 10-foot tall tree, and imagine that as an internet marketer's kind of dream of like the 10-foot tall tree representing the $1 million day or the 100,000 a month or 10K a month or whatever their number is, doesn't really matter. I mean, people all the time are like, you watch, I'm gonna build a 10-foot tall tree, I'm gonna be the coolest, like I'm gonna make the biggest, baddest ass tree. And then at the end of the day, they just actually don't like gardening. And so like, you know, they try and like make a 10-foot tall tree, and it may not happen. Now, the flip side of that is there's somebody who says, I'm going to optimize around the fact that I like gardening, because like gardening just lights me up. It's really cool. And I like hanging with plants. They're way easier than people. And they show up and they just water their plants. And somewhere along the line, they hit a 10-foot tall tree without even trying. And they just keep going because there's no reason for them to stop. It wasn't really about the 10-foot tall tree. And so I feel like internet marketers are largely people who say, I want to get a 10-foot tall tree. And then they all give up and go over to the next shiniest thing. When if they focused on like doing cool stuff with people they liked and sort of optimizing the process, the 10-foot tall tree is almost automatic, because you just get up and do it. Like every day I get up and help people sell stuff through video, but it's not because like there's a gun to my head going like, I just think it's really cool that people can sell stuff through video and like remove themselves from that process. And they're usually cool people with big ideas, and they're easy to talk to, and we get each other. And so I think it's an underrated piece. Like I feel like just most of our space is so focused on Lambo kind of lifestyle that they miss like, how do I just make a day work for me? How do I make a day lived on my own terms work for me? And then what happens is those days compound over time. And it's almost always the real benefit that everybody misses in our internet marketing space is momentum. And I see this where like somebody will be like, can you imagine being a plumber having to clean up shit? And I'm like, well, I probably wouldn't want to be a plumber cleaning up shit, but like internet marketers kind of laugh at these like old school slow businesses, but a plumber's probably still going to be cleaning toilets in 25 years. In just 3 months alone, you'll go from the NFT expert to the AI chat bot expert to the go high level SaaS to whatever the next thing is tomorrow, right? So like, because the plumber, because they're optimized for whatever it is they're trying to do, they actually get real momentum. And so that's the piece everybody misses, that if you do shit you like, momentum is the side effect of it, and then it eventually reaches a snowball where you're like, you know, you have this machine that's like, you know, supplying you and your lifestyle that you almost couldn't turn off even if you wanted to. But it's what I call like the best kind of famous. It's like niche famous, where you go to a conference, everybody knows your name, but when you go home, like when I walk down the beach, like I'm mildly internet famous in a small community of people, but like I've walked down 150 beaches around here. Nobody's ever asked for my autograph or anything like that. It's like as soon as I leave our little world, I'm nobody again. And I compare that to, I heard a story by Eminem where he said he was taking a shit and a hand came up under the stall and said, "Hey Eminem, I know it's a bad time, but I could really use an autograph for my kid." And that's the kind of fame you can't turn off, right? Like that's not what you kind of want in this business. But the side effect of creating momentum is like all these internet marketers know who Alex Hormozy is, but I bet you if he like, I don't know, you know, walks down the street in Costa Rica, there's probably nobody who knows who he is. He's probably just like an Italian looking gym guy. So I think that's the side effect of it, is you just like you compound in ways people can't imagine compounding. And there's like real kind of expertise and authority driven, but it's not driven because you're trying to get to a 10-foot tall tree. It's driven by the fact that you're just trying to optimize a day around gardening.
I think that's a beautiful note to end things on, Frankie. I love it. Thank you for coming and doing this again. I'm going to fucking lovingly make 3 copies of this file after I press stop, because just so you all know, Frankie threatened that he'll put a picture of me and draw a big dick on my head on the internet if I get this wrong a second time.
Legendary, just so you know.
Oh man, this is wonderful. I love it, and I know this is going to be well received, and people are going to get a lot out of it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this for me.
Thanks for having me, John. This was cool.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Cheers.
Yes, sir.